this is a 1-2 punch where we have a new season 2 of a board game that I just covered called Invincible the Hero-Building Game. And today we're going to be getting into all of the new stuff coming from this box, including 4 new heroes, 6 new scenarios, and 3 mechanics that actually help build the base game into a far better experience. Let's get into it, shall we? Hello everybody and welcome to the Boardgaymergirl channel. If you're new here, my name is Natalie and I like to talk about all things board games, but from a primarily solo perspective. Today we have a special little treat thanks to Direwolf Digital, who reached out to me after seeing my Solo Mode Check, which is a solo review series based on looking at multiplayer games from a solo perspective and wondering whether they are worthy of your shelf space if you were to only ever play the game solo. Thanks to that SMC episode of Invincible the Hero-Building Game, the base game box, Direwolf Digital reached out because they actually have a new box, and that box is Season 2. And Season 2 packs a whole bunch of new content, including new scenarios, new heroes, and new mechanics, following the animated series that the game is based off of. Before going further into this, I want to mention that my original SMC review of the base game, the Invincible Hero-Building Game, that one, the board game was actually bought myself and I was not paid for that review. But for this one, it is a paid sponsorship to bring you this campaign preview before the game is out on retail shelves. So without further ado, I think we shall get into a little bit about what this game is, because if you haven't seen my original Solo Mode Check episode, you might be a little in the dark. So in Invincible, the hero-building game, you are playing a game for 1 to 4 players where you are cooperatively picking different characters to act as their heroes and bag building to have different powers on your personal board or different cards that you'll be able to pay for and draft to upgrade your hero in order to either thwart, stop, or kick the villain in the booty to win a scenario. You have the choice of either being able to pick like random heroes in a random scenario and do kind of a one-shot sort of deal, or you can follow along in a campaign, as each of the boxes have a campaign guide which kind of follow the trajectory of the Season 1 of the animated series and now Season 2 of the animated series. In the base game, you have 4 different heroes consisting of Invincible, Adam Eve, Robot, and Rexplode. Each one comes with their own player board, the little standee, starting cards, and a bag. Your bag is kind of the big thing in the game, as the bag consists of different cubes. There are 4 different kinds of cubes: yellow, orange, blue, and purple. These are utilized for specific powers on your board or on cards, as well as black resources. And these cubes, there's 6 in every bag, but if you ever pull up to 5, then your hero crashes out. So it's also a push your luck kind of bag pulling situation. And while these can be bad cubes, they also act as wild cubes and therefore can be any color to activate any kind of powers on your boards and cards. You'll be taking rounds by pulling 3 at a time and then deciding if you're going to push your luck and continue to pull cubes and activate different powers to either rescue citizens, thwart a villain, which causes them to kind of not activate if they were to activate at a certain point, or kick villain booty and get rid of different minions and villains that are on the board. Each scenario has different win conditions, and if you meet that, then you win. But if you ever end up with having 15 civilians on the KO board at any time, you've lost the game. If at one point you have a whole zone where there are no more civilians on that board, then you've lost the game. And then if any of your heroes KO 3 times, you've lost the game. That is pretty much the board game in a little nutshell, and Season 2 kind of still builds on that foundation, but brings a lot more into it with more content, of course. There are 6 new scenarios with a new big bad. There are now 4 more heroes that come with their own special powers and change up a little bit of the base game mechanics for these heroes, as well as 3 new mechanics that improve upon areas in the base game where it felt like there needed to be a little mitigation, and it feels like somehow so fast they heard those little questionable moments and have fixed them with new mechanics. So for the scenarios, there are 6 more scenarios that you can play. Again, you can play these as one-shots, but the suggested scenario to start off with is Giant Mess. Every scenario, like the base game, comes with its own different situations that you might have to thwart or beat, and other things that you might want to pay attention to with new components for the scenario. So with these scenarios, I also have to mention, if you end up at the end of a scenario and you have not fulfilled the win condition, you automatically still lose. Big surprise. But again, for this Season 2 box, like the first box, the last big baddie that you're going to face is Omni-Man, which is similar to the Season 1 ending arc. And this is not different for the Season 2 box, as your final villain that you'll have to take on is Levy Angstrom. And Levy Angstrom is kind of the last villain that Invincible has to take on at the end of Season 2. So, with those said, I mention again that the episode 2 guide, if you want to play in a campaign style, gives you all of the instructions for each scenario if you're playing these scenarios in this way. Otherwise, these scenarios can be set up differently if you're doing one-shots, but you also have in the back of the book the original set of campaign pages if you wanted to go through Season 1 and then continue to Season 2 again, along with a Season 2 campaign guide that if you're tracking how you do at these scenarios, you can figure out what your score is at the end of the game to see how well you went through that scenario. So before we get into the 4 new heroes that are part of this new expansion, let's get into the 3 new major mechanics that Invincible the Hero-Building Game Season 2 brings to the game overall. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is these little fuel tokens. And fuel tokens actually work the same as those black tokens, but you don't have to pull them from the bag, and they aren't going to make your hero KO or crash out, I mean. The fuel tokens are tokens that you can accumulate based on different card powers that you can get. There's a bunch of new cards, obviously, in this expansion, and a few of them have ways that you can collect those fuel tokens. So instead of pulling them from the bag, you'll pull them from the supply and get to place them on one of your action spots on any of your cards or your board and utilize it as if it was one of the cubes of that color for that action. These fuel tokens get taken away at the end of the round and therefore are one use only, but they are an interesting way to let you have some more versatility in trying to pull the cubes that you'd like to pull and have those happen on your board or your cards without risking the mitigation of having to pull a wild token that could make you crash out. So the next mechanic is kind of one that helps a lot with the last mechanic on this list, which I think is the most game-changing mechanic, and that is including these little minus tokens. And these tokens are referred to as weakness tokens. So in the base game, there are tokens that have a plus symbol, and those plus symbol tokens are called strengthened tokens. They can be acquired by different heroes because of different cards that are played, and they can kind of boost your abilities when playing against different villains. In the second expansion, they actually include these because the villains can now use those strengthen tokens and strengthen their abilities when they want to punch you out or poo-poo on a civilian or anything like that. So now that these kind of go two-way, that you might want to collect weakened tokens so that you can place them on villains. The other reason you might want to collect these weakened tokens is for the final mechanic, which I think changes the game, and it is these Falter tokens. So these are a new type of token, and they don't start off in your bags at the beginning of a round, but they are kind of like the villain's way of being able to adjust your bag building tendencies, because as I mentioned in the base game box, as you proceed during the game, you would build up more cubes into your bag as you go along, but you wouldn't get any more negative cubes. So in a way, it felt like the risk to pushing your luck to acquire more cubes and have your powers go off was less risky as the game went on, which kind of felt like a weird backwards way of dealing with a villain or a scenario. So now villains fight back by putting these Falter tokens into your bag. At certain points in scenarios or different villain abilities, they will actually add these cubes that are called Falter Cubes. And these Falter Cubes go into your bag, and if you ever pull them, they don't actually get used by your hero. Well, except for one, which we'll get into. They end up being kind of like dead cubes. You can't use them for different actions, but they do come with a punch, literally. So these cubes will actually be pulled, and if there is any villains in your zone with your hero, then they will take a punch from the most punchy hero in that zone. So when you're trying to think about the push your luck element of pulling cubes from your bag, you actually have to watch your health point percentage as you're going through the game, because you might not be risking it by trying to avoid those black cubes and crashing out, but you could end up kind of KOing during your bag pull if your health is too low while you pull one of these Falter Cubes. So it's an interesting way to have the bag building aspect be a little bit more challenging and something you need to think about a little bit more, especially for some of these characters. But that's also why I think these weakened tokens help with that Falter Cube, because you can put these Falter tokens on villains in your zone so that when you do pull a Falter token, you can negate its effect by one punch or damage to your character. So let's get into the heroes. And the heroes in this box are really neat and very different from the base game box. The first one that I'll mention is the character Dupli-Kate. And Dupli-Kate is different because she doesn't come with just one, not two, but 3 different standees for her character in the game. This changes some of the rules in the game, as before you might have automatically assumed that every zone can only have a maximum of 4 characters in it, just because that the zones had a little circle area to show you where you could put your hero in any of the zones. Now with Dupli-Kate in the mix and her having up to 3 standees that you can put out during the game, you don't have a limit in being able to put more than 4 heroes in a zone. So Dupli-Kate can have all 3 of her figures in one zone, and she can have Invincible, and she can have Adam Eve, all in like zone A. But I digress. The thing about Dupli-Kate is that you'll start the game with the 1 standee in one of the zones, and then you can eventually work your way to get all 3 of them out. And it's very difficult to KO her because she's got multiple figures, and similar to the animated series, she can not be killed as easily, because as she makes more and more versions of herself, then they can die, but she is still a person that's alive. Unless, of course, you get to the final version of Dupli-Kate and you kill her off. And it is similar to the way that she works in this game, as her health point in the game is set at 4. And that is the difference in this game, that some heroes have a different health point number. And therefore, each of her standees have a health point value of 4. If they hit above 4, then you'd have to take one of the standees off of one of the zones and put that next to your board. But that doesn't mean that she is KO'd until it's her last standee on any of the boards that get hit for damage. So you're trying to think of how to make sure that you have multiple versions of her out on the table as much as possible. So that is Dupli-Kate, and Dupli-Kate is a very neat character, but the next one also has multiple standees. As the next one is Shrinking Ray, and Shrinking Ray has a regular size standee and then a little tiny Shrinking Ray standee as well, as these represent her powers in the game as well as the animated series. So Shrinking Ray, her main thing is that she can be regular size or she can be very small, and depending on what size she is, different actions are available to her and there are different powers that work. But figuring out when to change her size that best suits the situation. So for example, if she is in small size, then some of the actions allow her to thwart instead of rescue. And if she's in small size, she won't take the damage from a villain in that zone during the villain phase, but she can't use any of the rescue or protect any of the civilians on the board that she is placed on. So the other thing is, of course, once she becomes full form, and she's in a location and she changes from the small standee to the large standee, then she deals 4 punch power to whatever villain is in her zone at the time. And then, of course, she can regularly rescue other heroes or help save civilians, but she ends up taking the damage from the villain or the minions in that area. She has a regular health point of 10, but she is very fun to play, and it is interesting trying to figure out how to play her the best. So the next hero that we're going to talk about is a hero called Black Samson. And Black Samson, in both the show and in the game, is a character that their backstory is that they used to be a superpowered being, but has kind of dwindled in their superpowers. So in order to help them, they actually have acquired a super suit. So the mechanics in this game follow that kind of logic, as their board is actually double-sided. So you'll start the game on the first setup side of Black Samson, and you'll take 4 or 5 of these different suit tokens. And Black Samson pretty much works with those fuel tokens that I mentioned earlier, as these super suit powers actually only go off if you collect the fuel tokens and place them on them. What you'll be needing to do is, as you progress through the game and you utilize these super suit powers, you'll be flipping them over as only 1 time per game that you're able to use them. Once you're finished through at least 3 of them or more, by the end of the round, you'll be flipping this board over, and Black Samson will have a different card that will be available to them, and they'll play regularly. So instead, it's kind of a different setup, and because you have a lot of these super suit powers, you actually start the game at 8 health, but when you flip Black Samson's board over, you'll end up with 10 HP for the rest of the game. And then the rest of the game, you'll play regularly, but part of their mechanic is utilizing and using those fuel tokens as best as possible for their board. So it's a neat way to integrate this mechanic into one of the heroes for the game. So the last hero that we're going to talk about is a character called Monster Girl. And Monster Girl is a character that, as they utilize their power more and more, as they kind of transform from their human side to their great big hulking monster side, they end up having to de-age themselves. So they're a full-grown person with many lives and experiences, like in their mind, but they appear in their human form as a child because the more that they hulk out kind of thing, they grow younger. And that is obviously its own story in the animated series. For this game, they only have the monster standee utilized. There is nothing to do with the little girl, but just so that you understand the context of why they're called Monster Girl. But Monster Girl is probably one of the more complex characters from the expansion box, as they utilize those Falter tokens that I was talking about before. So these little cubey people. So as I mentioned, most people, when they're put in their bag and they do pull one of the Falter Cubes, they end up kind of like dead on arrival. They cannot use them for any of the board action powers or any of the cards in their area. But for Monster Girl, they are able to utilize these Falter Cubes. They still will take the regular damage that you would get from pulling a Falter Cube, which is obviously you pull the cube. If there is a villain in your area, you take the highest hit point damage onto your character for pulling that cube. Then for the Monster Girl character, they get to still use that cube as if it was a wild. So you're kind of filling your bag with wilds that you're able to utilize, but you have to mitigate the risk of getting your health points damaged. And for that reason, Monster Girl also has a health point value of 12 to start the game, which of course is also thematically accurate, being that they are a superpowered, large, hulking-like monster thing. But that is pretty much how Monster Girl works, and that is the 4 different heroes that you'll get out of the expansion box. Other things that I do want to note is that obviously this expansion comes with a whole bunch of new cards for level 1, level 2, level 3 villains. There are new superpower cards, a whole chunk of them, and new of the extra superpower cards that come in the game. And then all of the hero characters come with their own starting power and their expanded starting power on setup. That is basically what comes in this box. Other things to be aware of is that there are some slight rules changes, as I mentioned. It's not necessarily a rules change, but a clarification that there is no limit to the amount of heroes that you have on a single zone in the main board area. And when you're going to be selecting your cubes from the bag, so it's a simultaneous game, but in the first round, everyone is going to pull their 3 cubes from their bag to start popping them off somewhere on their board or their characters' cards. But when you get to the next round, everyone has to decide simultaneously if they are going to push their luck or if they're going to draw before any other decisions get made. Because in some cases, it could maybe have been thought possible that one person could wait to decide if they're going to pull or wait, depending on if somebody else pulled stuff and was able to do something. So I think that's a good rules clarification for the game, as again, it's a simultaneous game. And lastly, when it comes to components, I do want to mention that obviously this expansion does not come with all of the components in the base game. You'll need to have the base game in order to play the expansion, but you also will not get new bags for this expansion. So in the base box, there are 4 new bags that you get for the characters of Invincible, Robot, Rexplode, and Adam Eve. And these bags can be utilized for any of these heroes. The only difference is that on the outer part of the bag, they have the colors associated with those original base box games, but there really is no difference. It's kind of like a cosmetic coloring on the bag. And it still helps with if you're playing solo, for example. The official solo is that you'll play 2-handed. So as long as you have 2 bags that are of different colors, then you're good to go and won't get it mixed up. I think other than that, that is everything covered for this expansion. The pre-order is live for this game on the Direwolf Digital website, but it is releasing for the first time at Gen Con this week as at the end of the week, it's Gen Con 2026. So if you see Direwolf at one of the booths in the Gen Con hall, they will have this expansion set up and ready to buy. For the retail release that is official, I am not sure on the date as of yet, but if I do get that, I will leave that in the description below. Otherwise, my question to you is, which is the most interesting character that you'd want to play? Or which character from the animated series is your favorite and has not yet been represented? Let me know in the comments below if you have any answers for that. Otherwise, that is the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one. So, goodbye!